Thank you, Rufus. Hi, everybody. My name's Bob. I'm from San Francisco. I apologize for our presidential candidates. It's not my fault. I had nothing to do with it, believe me. I'm not a newspaper guy. I'm an advertising guy. And I'm here to contradict pretty much everything you hear and read about advertising and marketing. The title of my talk is Marketers Are From Mars, Consumers Are From New Jersey, which is also the title of my most recent book. As some of you probably know, Mars and New Jersey are very different kinds of places. One is an uninhabitable, desolate wasteland, and the other one is a planet. The thesis of my talk is that the marketing and advertising industries are currently in a state of great confusion. In fact, we're so confused we have lost touch with reality and also with average consumers, or as I like to call them, people. It's my view that consumers are basically simple creatures with straightforward needs and easily observed behaviors. Marketers, on the other hand, are complicated bastards with strange customs and mysterious beliefs. We marketers are taught not to think simply. In fact, the whole practice of marketing is based on the conviction that there are forces at work in the minds of consumers that only trained specialists, us, are qualified to interpret. Thinking simply has been beaten out of us. You can't be taken seriously in any marketing or advertising organization if you suggest that the bulk of consumer behavior is perfectly obvious. You can't advance your career by speaking plainly and asserting that the reason people buy most products is because they are tastier, prettier, cheaper, or are simply more readily available. To be taken seriously as a marketer, you need to think and speak in ways that no normal person in the history of civilization has ever thought or spoken. How we marketers think and how consumers think couldn't be more different. Here's how marketers think. How can I engage consumers with my brand to create a community? How do I connect the authenticity of my brand with my target audience? How can I co-create with my target audience and develop a conversation? Here's how consumers think. Is there going to be parking? Is this fucking thing going to work? How vigorously are they going to screw me? Will someone please pick up the goddamn telephone? Consumers want simplicity and clarity. Marketers want to complicate the shit out of everything. I believe we're blinded by complexity, and we are confusing complexity with diligence. Every day we agency people go into work and we have meetings and we have conference calls and we write briefs and we build PowerPoint decks and we read emails and we write memos and we make presentations and we have uploads and downloads and offsites and insights. And as a byproduct of all this bullshit, every now and then an ad appears somewhere. Am I right, agency people? Everything has gotten so complex and so confusing. We don't know what we're doing anymore. Are we selling products or having conversations? Are we curating content or doing branded storytelling or brand engagement or co-creating or building communities? We don't know what the hell we're doing anymore. And the more elaborate and the more convoluted our processes have become and the more dreadful our jargon has become, the farther away we have gotten from the people who we are supposed to be influencing. Now, as you well know, there have been amazing changes in technology and media and communication. And these changes were supposed to bring radical changes to consumer behavior. But as far as I can tell, they have affected our businesses and our work environments far more than they have affected the purchasing habits of average consumers. Most people still go to the grocery a few times a week. They still buy cars at a car dealership. They still go out to restaurants. They still annoy the hell out of me at coffee shops. According to the US Department of Commerce, in the third quarter of last year, 6.8% of retail activity in the US occurred online. 93.2% occurred in a store. 1.8% of consumer purchases are made on a smartphone. 98.2% are not made on a smartphone. And yet, if you were to read the literature of our industry, you would have to believe that we buy everything online and mostly on our mobile devices. Now, I am from another country, so I don't know how closely the statistics from the US mirror those of yours. But I'd be very surprised if there's a great deal of difference. As far as I can tell, Americans are just Brits with handguns. I believe we have been operating under some highly questionable assumptions that have disconnected us from the thinking and behavior of average people. We have grossly exaggerated the importance of brands in the lives of consumers. We have an immoderate and false faith in the death of traditional marketing practices and media. We have largely overstated the sales value of social media. We are conveniently disregarding the alarming amount of sleaze, fraud, and corruption in the online advertising industry. We are abjectly disregarding people over 50 who are the most powerful consumer group in the history of the world. And we have grossly inflated the importance of advertising media at the expense of advertising creativity. Other than that, we're doing great. Now, I only have about 25 minutes here to piss off every CMO in the room, so I'm going to focus on 3 areas that I believe are significantly responsible for our estrangement from reality. They are the brand delusion, second is the digital delusion, and third is the age delusion. All of these delusions have one thing in common. They take a little bit of truth, and then they distort it, and they exaggerate it, and they torture it to the point at which it does us marketers more harm than good. Let's start with our first delusion, the brand delusion. Now, as I'm sure you know, creating a strong brand should be every marketer's primary objective. And the highest goal of advertising is to create a strong brand. But our industry has taken these truths and twisted them into silly fantasies. There's a widespread belief in our business that consumers are in love with brands, that consumers want to have brand experiences and brand relationships and be personally engaged with brands and read branded storytelling and co-create with brands. Let's listen to Saatchi and Saatchi's description of what they call love marks. They reach your heart as well as your mind, creating an intimate, emotional connection that you just can't live without. It's very touching. Unfortunately, it's bullshit. In fact, a study by Havas Media said, quote, in Europe and the US, people would not care if 92% of brands disappeared from the face of the earth. And to be perfectly honest here, I would not care if Havas Media disappeared from the face of the earth. One consequence of all this baloney is that we have spent almost 10 years and billions of dollars exhorting people to join the conversation about our brands. What I want to know is what conversation? All you have to do is go to your Facebook page, and if you can read, you can see that no one is having a conversation about brands. But don't take my word for it. A study by Forrester Research reported that only 0.07%, that's 7 in 10,000 of a major brand's followers engage with one of its Facebook posts. On Twitter, the number is even lower, 4 in 10,000. And remember, this isn't for consumers in general. This is just for the tiny component of the population who already turned themselves in and became fans of the brand. And yet there are people in our business who actually believe that consumers are in love with brands. You go to their Twitter profiles, I'm passionate about brands. You're what? Dude, get a fucking girlfriend. Now, once again, let me state the obvious. Yes, having a strong brand should be every marketer's primary objective, and yes, the highest goal of advertising is to create a strong brand. But that's it. No, for the most part, consumers are not in love with our brands, and no, for the most part, consumers do not want to have a conversation with your brand or an authentic relationship with it, or dance with it, or spend a romantic seaside weekend with it. Of all the factors related to consumer behavior, perhaps none is more mischaracterized than brand loyalty. Most of what we call brand loyalty is simply habit, convenience, mild satisfaction, or easy availability. Now, are some consumers strongly attached to a few brands? Sure they are. And fortunately for the newspaper industry, newspapers are one of the categories that consumers do demonstrate actual loyalty to. But remember, we each participate in hundreds of product categories and are strongly attached to maybe a handful of brands. I promise you, if Pepsi would disappear tomorrow, most Pepsi loyalists would switch to Coke with very little psychological damage. Nike loyalists would throw on a pair of Adidas without having to enter rehab, and Big Mac lovers would cheerfully eat a Whopper without the need for counseling. You see, a lot of people have shaky jobs and unstable families. They have illnesses, they have debts, they have washing machines that don't work, they have funny things growing on their backs, they have kids that are unhappy, they have a lot of things to care deeply about. It's very unwise to believe that they care deeply about our batteries, our wet wipes, and our frozen chicken strips. A smart marketer does not delude herself into believing that there are legions of people out there who want to engage with her brand or share her brand stories. If there are some, that's great, but she's not going to bet the future on it. For a smart marketer, every day is Groundhog Day. Every day you have to get up, drag your ass to work, and tell the world once again why they should buy your stuff. The point is this. Our brands are very important to us marketers, but not very important at all to most consumers. Our next delusion is the digital delusion. Now, has digital and online technology become an important and inescapable part of our lives? Absolutely. Everything we in the communications business do now is digital or online. Our work is digital, our communications are digital, our expertise is digital. And that's the problem. As a result of all our reliance on digital technology, we have made a very incautious leap of logic. We have assumed that digital technology has made irrelevant everything that came before it. For over 10 years, we've been hearing about how the digital revolution was going to change everything. It was going to kill advertising. It was going to kill traditional marketing. It was going to kill everything in its path. Let's have a look at what we've been told and see how it aligns with reality. We'll start with the supposed death of advertising. In 2004, research company Forrester & Company proclaimed we had reached the end of the era of mass marketing. In 2008, Seth Godin, best-selling author on marketing, proclaimed the end of traditional advertising. In 2009, the advertising age said the post-advertising age is underway. Bob Garfield, a columnist at Ad Age, said in 2009, the present is apocalyptic. Any hope for a seamless transition or any transition at all from mass media and marketing to micromedia and marketing are absurd. The sky is falling. We are exquisitely, irretrievably fucked. Bob's actually a good guy, but he really needs a hug. And the Huffington Post just came out and said it last year, advertising is dead. So here's my dilemma. I'm confused. Everywhere I look, I see advertising. Just walk outside. It's everywhere. It's on every building, every bus, every t-shirt, every bench, every boarding pass, every theater ticket, every square inch of the fucking planet is covered in advertising, and these jerks are telling us it's dead. In fact, worldwide advertising expenditures have reached all-time highs. If our economies were growing at the same rate as advertising, we'd be dancing in the streets. I'm sorry, you can't kill advertising. On that final day, when the big flaming asteroid bears down on our poor little planet, there'll be only two things left: cockroaches and copywriters. It all comes back to the digital delusion. You see, interactivity was going to make advertising so much more effective. Interactive advertising was going to disrupt the old forms of advertising in media and make them obsolete. Well, I'm sad to report that consumers have demonstrated almost no interest whatsoever in interacting with advertising. Display ads have a click rate of somewhere about 8 in 10,000. This is not interactivity. This is absence of interactivity. Solve Media, a company that measures this stuff, says you are more likely to complete Navy SEAL training than click on a banner ad. The idea that the same consumer who was frantically clicking her TV remote to escape from ads was going to gleefully click her mouse to interact with them is going to go down as one of the great marketing delusions of all time. What's just as bad is that the few interactions that do occur online, an alarming amount, are fraudulent. According to CNET, a report said that only 38% of traffic on the web is human. The rest are bots, scrapers, hackers, spammers, and other impersonators. Now, not all bots are malevolent. Nonetheless, the amount of fraud being perpetrated on advertisers by online scammers is astounding. MediaPost says one average botnet can produce 1 billion fraudulent online ad impressions a day. And nobody knows how many average botnets there are out there, or above average botnets. According to the publisher of Advertising Age, there is massive fraud in the digital marketplace. According to Adweek magazine, online ad fraud in the US alone may have reached $9.5 billion in 2014. Now, if the problems of consumer indifference and fraud aren't bad enough, there's also the problem of what we politely call viewability. A study done by Google a while ago reported that 56% of display ads paid for by advertisers were not viewable and never appeared in front of a live human being. A similar study reported in the New York Times claimed that 57% of 2 billion online video ads studied were also not viewable. Last year, Kraft, one of our largest advertisers, announced that it is rejecting between 75 and 85% of online impressions because they are deemed to be fraudulent, unsafe, unviewable, or unknown. And if all this fraud isn't bad enough, according to a study reported by Media Post, 60% of clicks on mobile display ads are mistakes. Yet marketers are pouring more and more money into online advertising. They don't know what they're buying, they don't know who they're buying it from, they don't know what they're getting, and they don't know how much they're paying. If there's a better definition of being on Mars, I'd like to know what it is. The ironic thing is that despite all the hype and all the money that has changed hands, it's my belief that digital advertising has not been a strong advertising force. People ask me how I can maintain such an obviously retro, old guy, unpopular opinion, and I tell them this: don't listen to a word I say. Become a scientist, do your own research. Go to the biggest supermarket in your neighborhood, walk up and down the aisles, and make a list of all the brands you can find that were built by online advertising. All the brands of toothpaste and toasters and beer and cereal and soap and soda and snacks and baked goods and cheese and shampoo and tea and tomato sauce. And I think you'll find what I found. You don't have a list. Newspapers and TV and radio have built thousands of successful consumer-facing brands in hundreds of categories. Where are the big consumer-facing brands that have been built by online advertising? Sure, there are some big web-native brands, Amazon and Netflix, but how about the vast majority of brands that don't live on the web? Where are the brands of beer and soda and fast food and appliances and snacks that were built by online advertising? There's something striking about the phenomenal success of Apple. Despite being the world's premier technology company and one of the world's most successful online transactional marketers, the overwhelming majority of Apple's advertising money is spent in non-digital media. They use the web nicely for their below-the-line stuff, and they do some search, but their product advertising and their brand advertising is almost exclusively of the non-digital variety. Mostly all they do is print, TV, and outdoor, and yet somehow they've managed to survive and, oh yeah, become the world's most valuable company. And what have the wizards of marketing and advertising learned from Apple? Absolutely nothing. Finally, we have one last delusion to talk about, the age delusion. Is it important to address advertising to young people? Sure it is. They are the heavy users in a lot of consumer goods categories. But one of the practices that I've never understood is why we spend so much of our time, money, and energy talking to young people and so little talking to older people. I always assumed that there were some pretty good facts to justify this somewhere, and I just hadn't run into them. So about 3 years ago, when I sold my agency, I had time on my hands, and I started to look into this. And here's what I found. We don't know what we think we know. I have come to believe that most marketers target young people because they see everyone else doing it. And they assume that somewhere there must be someone who knows why the hell we're doing this. In other words, somewhere at the end of all this, there's a smart person with a fact. Well, if there is, I haven't found him. Here's what I have found. According to Nielsen, people over 50 are the most valuable generation in the history of marketing. In the US, they are responsible for over 50% of all consumer spending. They outspend the average consumer in nearly every product category: food, household furnishings, entertainment, personal care, automotive. They account for 55% of all consumer packaged goods sales and dominate 94% of consumer packaged goods categories. They outspend other adults online 2 to 1 on a per capita basis. They have a net worth about 3 times that of other generations. They buy about 60% of all new cars. By the way, here's a fun fact. You know all the awesome millennials we see in car ads? Well, in the US, people 75 to dead buy 6 times as many new cars as people 18 to 24. People over 50 control about 70% of the wealth in the US. If they were their own country, they would be the 3rd largest economy in the world, bigger than India, Japan, and Germany. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you really think it's a good idea to ignore these people? And yet, people over 50 are the target for 10% of marketing activity in the US. Why does this foolishness exist? Because marketers are from Mars. We have invented all kinds of bullshit for why we ignore people over 50. But the real reason we ignore them is that we hate them. The marketing and advertising industries hate old people. We like the excitement of youth, not the boredom of middle age and the frailties of old age. We can't build ourselves a hot advertising career by talking to old farts. Consequently, we have invented all kinds of convenient baloney to justify our malpractice. The big problem here is that there's no one over 50 left in advertising. The advertising and marketing industries have been demographically cleansed of people over 50. While the over 50 adult population of the US is 42%, the over 50 population of the advertising industry is under 6%. Our neglect of older consumers and our pandering to young people is nothing but narcissism disguised as strategy. It's marketing by selfie stick. I guess Forbes magazine summed it up best. People over 50, they said, are the most ignored wealthy people in the history of marketing. Okay, I'm almost done here. So what are we to make of all this? Despite our veneer of creativity, the advertising business is one of the most imitative and conformist businesses in the world. Once something becomes trendy, it is very difficult and, in fact, dangerous for someone to go against the grain. I could never have said to my clients 3 years ago when I was CEO of an ad agency what I have said here today. It would have been too dangerous. Are things changing? Of course things are changing. Things are always changing. I'm not saying we should ignore technology or that new media modes can't be useful or that young people should be ignored. What I am saying is that we need to maintain some perspective and get over our obsessions. We need to stop falling for the exaggerated, irresponsible baloney that has been sold to us by people with an ideological or financial interest in creating hysteria and promising miracles. We've become too gullible and too respectful. We need to question everything. Here's my advice. Give yourself the wonderful freedom of skepticism. Don't listen to loudmouths like me. Go out and dig up the facts for yourself and draw your own conclusions. Nobody is smarter than the facts. I'm astounded that a whole industry that's supposed to be creative and forward-thinking has been operating on unreliable principles and fanciful delusions that have been sold to us by people who have been wrong over and over. The marketing industry has been spending too much time on another planet. We need to get back down to earth. Thank you very much.